Don't skip ahead really quickly. I just gotta tell you, myself and Kev are doing a live episode, a live gig, event, spectacular extravaganza show in the Laughter Lounge in Dublin on the 30th of January 2025. It's going to be great. Get tickets now. You can find them on laughterlounge.com and you'll find links to all of it on our social media at Shite Talk History. And number two, I just wanted to say a big thanks to the Irish Rock and Roll Museum Experience down in Temple Bar for letting us record last week's episode about Rory Gallagher and this week's episode about Phil Lynott. It was a lot of fun doing the tour and getting to record in the studios with all of Phil Lynnott's gear all around us. And when they weren't looking, I played one of the guitars. Is that a joke? Who knows? Who knows? Listen to the episode to find out. Yeah, good luck. Enjoy. Buy tickets to the Laughter Lounge.
Gather around now, you're in for a story. Old tales of lore, on search of a glory. The history and mystery of lads, lasses and all. Discoveries and voyages, the rise and the fall. Follow me now as we go back in time. We trace the steps of Irish lineage to find. Joseph from Carlisle and Kevin the dog guide you through the ways of Shite.
In 1948, the Dublin-born Philomena Lynott, which is the first note that we learned from this together, it's Lynott.
Lynott, yeah.
Which later on, I guess he probably wouldn't bother labouring the point because he spends a lot of time emphasising that he's an Irishman.
Mm-hmm.
And it would only make things more confusing if he then corrected them to the English pronunciation of his name.
But that's what I've heard, that would, like, because it said that he would have pronounced it Lynott.
Yeah.
And he maybe corrected people and told them, no, it's not Lynott, it's actually Lynott. And then that his ma, when they put up the statue of him, was like, no, it's Lynott. It's pronounced Lynott.
Yeah.
But in an English accent, because she was an English woman.
Well,
I'm just saying, like, you would go by the English pronunciation.
Sure. Lynott, either way, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's Phil.
If he played rugby, it'd be Phil Lynott.
That's great. Well, right, well, it's not that one. All right. But she met Cecil Paris. Cecil or Cecil Paris.
Oh,
nicknamed the Duke.
I thought that was actually his name, Cecil Cecil.
No, his name was Cecil the Duke Paris.
Oh.
Yeah. So he's from Georgetown, what was British Guyana at the time, but is now just Guyana.
Not Georgetown, Ohio.
No. I was on a bus a while ago, which is how all of our good stories start. And there was a man from Cork. He was day drinking. No harm. Sitting in the back of the bus, having a few cans. He was talking to a guy. He was talking to a black man on the bus, and he kept asking him, "Well, lad, where are you from?" And the guy was like, "Well, I'm from Ireland." He's like, "Yeah, but like, where are you from?" And he was like, "Well, I'm from Guyana. Phil Lynnott's father is from Guyana." And the guy said, "Well, I'm from Cork anyway." And it was amazing. I'm actually from Guyana. Phil Lynott and Lizzy. His dad is from Guyana.
That's not as important to a Cork person, the fact that they're from Cork.
When Cork people say, "Where are you really from?" they don't care.
They want an answer.
It's not a racist thing.
They want an answer, and then for you to respond to the question of saying, "And where are you from?"
Exactly.
Or B, if you don't,
there was a very pregnant pause.
They'll just say it anyway.
Yeah, when he's like, "Where are you from?" It's not a racial thing. They just want you to return the favor so that they can tell you that they're from Cork. I'd forgotten that until I started writing the script. That was that made me laugh for quite a while. I'm from Cork anyway, and just barreled straight ahead with whatever the hell he was going to talk about. But anyway, his dad, I think there's we'll talk about his dad a little bit as we go through, but a lot of reports he's from Brazil. He's from Guyana. But anyway, so the two of them meet. They're in a relationship for a couple of months. Before this is a bit, I've read a lot of different reports of this as well. Either he moves to London for work, or Philomena moves to London for work. Either way, they separate after a couple of weeks. Shortly thereafter, Philomena realizes she's pregnant. So, on the 20th of August, 1949, she gives birth to Phil Lynott in the Hallam Hospital in West Bromwich, England. So he's a Brummie.
Mm-hmm.
So after Phil's born, she moves with the baby to a home for unmarried mothers in Selly Park, back in Birmingham.
which would be better than being in a home for soon-to-be unmarried pregnant women in Ireland.
That's true, yeah. There's conflicting reports in this bit now as to how much contact Philomena and Cecil had. I think I read one report that they're both living back in the same area.
I was going to say, for Phil to show up, there must have been some level of contact.
Yeah, well. After I read some reports saying that he kept in contact and paid some dues towards the kid. I read some of the reports saying that she had a very hard time tracking him down. I don't know. After a while, he goes back to Ghana, I think, and she settles in Manchester for a bit. As to how much they kept in touch at that stage, I don't know. But Philomena actually has 2 more kids over the next couple of years, which both she has to place into adoption. So there's another theme through Phil and his life is orphanages and adoption, that sort of stuff. But he starts school in Moss Side, Manchester, in 1957. But she's worried about racist incidences. I don't know if they're any particularly affecting him, but there's just an air of tension around race at the time.
I thought you were going to say, worry too much about racist incidents in Manchester. Let's move him back to Dublin.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. So she says, Manchester in the 50s, too racist. Time to send him back to Crumlin. So he gets sent to live with her parents, Frank and Sarah Lynott, in Crumlin in Dublin. So they keep in touch. She remains close to them, visiting them fairly regularly. But he's now raised mostly by his grandmother, although Frank apparently plays like a pivotal father role, alongside his 2 uncles, Peter and Timmy, or Timothy. So Timmy's supposed to be the sort of money earner, hardworking kind of influence, I guess, on him. He's keeping the family not wealthy, but like keeping them afloat. And then Peter's only
the cool uncle.
Peter's the cool uncle.
Yeah.
Peter's 2 years older than Phil, so he's pretty much he's their brothers, basically. Peter, big interest in music, and Phil gets exposed to... He credits his early love of music to his uncle's record collection.
Like it was Dublin at the time, so how many albums would he have had? He had a vast collection of 2 LPs.
Mostly, yeah, and it's a lot of like Motown stuff, but this is like, Phil spends a lot of time listening to these bands and gets really into them. So moving into his school days, this is repeated in every documentary about him. You're interviewing all these musicians, all these Irish people, and they all keep saying he was the only black kid in Ireland. Like, I can get if people like, he was a lot of people might have known the other black people in Ireland at the time, but they keep hitting the fact that he was the only black school kid in Ireland. He was the only black child in Ireland. He was the only black person in Ireland, a lot of them would say. That's not necessarily true.
Probably not true at all.
Apparently, in 1962, so the year as he would have started going into school, there was 1,100 African students in Ireland because the Irish government... We were fucked at the time as a way to make the place. They basically, and there's a lot of like Christian missionary work or whatever in Africa. So they may set up systems to bring a lot of students over to learn in Trinity and RCSI. So it was actually, I never knew this, but apparently 1 in 10 university students in Ireland at the time was African.
Okay.
Which is insane. And also the complete opposite of what everyone was saying. You wouldn't even see a black
They were just calling everyone Phil.
Yeah. Phil, they were just seeing the one guy that got played though was Phil. All the time.
Phil, is yourself again?
So there you go. Apparently it was the opposite. Now at the Crumlin school level, he was the only black kid. So when he attended the Christian Brothers School in Crumlin, there was... Again, conflicting reports as to how much racial stuff he was subjected to. A lot of people would be like, I'm sure there was no racism there. We thought he was British and we bet him up for that. But after a while, we got used to it. Now, that's what people would say. Phil would also say there wasn't much racism, but he would also claim that, the first days he arrived at school, they'd throw names like Blackie. That's what's printed in this. Probably other worse names. The term Balubu was thrown around. That was for people who knew they shouldn't use such a thing. But basically... him, alongside Peter, just got in a lot of fights in the early days and worked their way into the school system. They basically first couple of weeks was a lot of fist fights. Then after that, it settled in. And they didn't see colour anymore, as he said, which mostly rant is the synopsis of his school days.
Okay.
Yeah. In the CBS, he meets his lifelong intermittent bandmate, Brian Downey. So Downey was from Crumlin. At the age of 13, he'd been taking part in various Crumlin school bands, including the Mod Con Cave Dwellers and the Liffey Beats.
Mod Con or Mod Gone?
Mod Con might have been better, but it was Mod Con
Okay.
Cave Dwellers. A lot of band names in this. Probably not, you don't need to remember all of them, but I wrote them all down, so we'll do them all. In 1965, Phil joined his first band, the Black Eagles. They had just been called the Eagles, and then he joined. No, Peter was apparently up. His uncle, Peter, was apparently asked to be the lead singer, and he turned it down, and Phil took his place.
Oh.
So Black Eagles is his first band. It was controlled by manager Joe Smith, and Phil was lead vocalist alongside Alan Sinclair, and then Joe's sons, Danny and Frankie Smith. They were a cover band. They predated the Eagles by 6 years, so they were mostly doing covers of like the Kinks, the Beatles, the Yardbirds, other bands like this. Each member of the band was paid 10 shillings per gig by Joe Smith, and the promise of a trip to Butlins every year.
Oh.
So that's pretty good. What, in 1965, he's like 16-ish.
Because you could have just been going to Clara Lara. But he's saying Butlins.
He's like, I've heard dodgy things about Clara. So...
You know, you with the Christian Brothers at the minute?
Yeah.
It gets worse.
Yeah.
Ooh, 3 months off in the summer. What are we getting up to?
I tell you.
A residency in Clara Lara.
So, but it wasn't all, trips to Butlins. Joe controlled the band with an iron fist. He owned all the equipment and pretty much decided everything, every aspect of the band. So it wasn't very much freedom in it. But at one gig, the Mod Con Cave Dwellers from earlier, they opened for Black Eagle. And Brian Downey was playing with them at that stage. His performance on drums impressed the band, including Lynott. So much so that they extended an invitation for him to come down and audition. They were looking for a drummer. Basically, the test they would give them all was to play You Really Got Me by the Kinks. So they bring Brian down. He came down, and the minute he could play the beat, he got the job. Plus, he had tom-toms, which the other drummer didn't have.
That's a good help.
Again, they're all like 16, so he has... Although, to be fair, it does seem like a pretty successful band, the Black Eagles. Like, they have a manager, I guess, first of all.
And they're getting paid.
Well, there's money involved. And so they secured a residency in a club in Dublin. They played 4 nights a week there, and where I suppose they'd get into the ballroom or the show band ballroom circuit. So they'd turn around with them. They'd obviously gotten to the level where they had a band opening for them. So anyway, Danny impresses them playing for the Mod Con Cave Dwellers. He comes over, joins the band. But the band doesn't last much longer after that. Ultimately, Joe Smith dissolves it after his 2 sons leave. So he was only managing a band either to keep an eye on his sons or to make them think he was cool. They effect off.
They left of their own accord.
They left. I don't know. I don't think so. I think they just left.
Because that would have been a ballsy move.
Yeah.
Phil was like, right, you two out. Joe, next gig, come on.
Hire another
What do you mean you're
guitarist.
going?
So there's some cool photos of them. This is his original lineup, and his original lineup is a first of many iterations with Brian Downey on drums. But again, they're very young, and this is his first kind of experience of rock and roll lifestyle. But they break up sometime in 1966. In the same year, his mother, who's back in Manchester, she's gotten into a relationship with a guy called Dennis Keeley, and they take over the running of the Clifton Grange Hotel in Whalley Range in Manchester, with the sole purpose of creating a showbiz refuge. So according to her, we ran the hotel to suit show business people, not normal people. Breakfast wasn't at 8 a.m, it was at noon. And if you missed noon, you just got into the kitchen and cooked it yourself. It wasn't really a hotel, it was a showbiz digs. So that's great. I like that.
Was it busy?
It was like, if you see pictures of it, it doesn't look like a hotel so much as like it's like 3 stories tall. It's a strange looking building. It looks like it should belong to a bigger block of apartments, but it's sitting by itself. I think it was busy, but it was busy. Later on, it would get tied into Thin Lizzy's fame. But it's kind of just, it is what she set out to make. It is like we'll talk about some of the stories involving that place later on, but it becomes like a cool hangout spot for, punk musicians. George Best hangs there a bit. Gangsters, mafia types. So it's busy, but a lot of it is kind of hinged around the personality.
The artists.
Yeah. Does it make any money? Probably not, no. But it is a showbiz digs. So Back in Dublin after the Black Eagles, Phil and Brian found themselves at Clogher Road Technical College, with Phil training as a fitter and turner. But it wasn't for him, and he leaves school and the family home in Crumlin shortly afterwards, moves into a flat in Clontarf, where he briefly joined the group Kama Sutra. It was with them. I'd seen this written at some point, probably by whoever was in Kama Sutra. They say that it was with them they learned his frontman skills and worked on how to interact with an audience. I don't think that's true, because he doesn't learn how to do that for quite a while, which causes a lot of hardship for the first iterations of his band. But he does play with them. So in early 1968, he teams up with bassist Brendan Brush Shields to form Skid Row. Brush Shields is another big name in Irish music. There's some of his stuff over in the Rock and Roll Museum Experience here in Temple Bar. They are forming Skid Row. Shields also wanted Brian Downey for drums, but he turned them down to go join the Burma Boys show band.
Later changed to the Myanmar Men.
The Myanmar Men. So Skid Row was instead Phil, Brendan, the drummer Noel Bridgman, and Bernard Cheevers. The band is also mostly like a cover band doing Beatles covers and Jimi Hendrix stuff. Since Phil still hadn't learned how to play an instrument at this stage.
So he's just a front man.
Just a front man. And not much of a front man, not a confident front man.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of later stage of like the confident, oozing, charismatic guy doesn't exist yet. But at this stage, the band's much more instrumental that he's playing with, so he kind of learns how to use an echo box during instrumental sections. So he's doing something.
Mm-hmm.
It was during this period he took to smearing boot polish under his eyes to draw attention to himself. He's the only musician who could. Which is a thing that he kept throughout the rest of his career. He'd regularly perform. He started getting more into like the play acting he'd like perform mock fights and stuff on stage with Shields, and just kind of, I think he was trying to figure out what to do to make himself more comfortable on stage.
Oh yeah.
But about halfway through the year's 68, so about halfway through the existence of the band, Bernard Cheevers, the guitarist, leaves to go work in the Guinness Brewery, and he's replaced by the legendary Belfast-born Gary Moore.
Yes.
This is where Gary Moore comes in. Again, there's a lot of iterations of both Thin Lizzy and the other bands he's involved in. A lot of people coming and going. It's mostly, I don't want to say it's the Phil Lynott show, because Brian Downey is also like a consistent feature, but a lot of people will come and go. Gary Moore was one of them. So he'll pop in and out of the story a lot. Despite the success, though, of Skid Row, including the release of their single New Faces, Old Places, which is pretty good. It's all right. Shields became concerned about Lynott's tendency to sing off-key. So after a while, they discovered there was an issue with his tonsils. He had some sort of issue with his tonsils that was affecting his singing. So he takes a leave of absence to go get that sorted. But during his recovery period, Shields realizes that he can just do most of the singing himself and changes the band to a three-piece. So when Lynott comes back, he finds out that he's been kicked out of the band.
Yeah.
But as a consolation prize,
The Lynott's changed.
I've heard two versions of this story. One is the version that's written in all the articles written about this. The other was told to me in a pub. So I'm going to go with that pub version. Basically, Shields felt guilty for having to kick him out of the band. So as a consolation prize, he was like, right, you're out, but I'm going to teach you how to play the guitar. So you're not... Just so we're square, you need something else. But you didn't want to teach him how to play a full guitar, so he taught him how to play the bass.
There you go.
Yeah. So
everyone will think he's Jimi Hendrix otherwise.
Yeah.
Expectations are too high. You walk on stage, you're like, whoa, it's Hendrix.
He's playing Hendrix. You're never going to be as good a guitar player as Hendrix, but you can certainly play the bass as well as him.
Yeah.
So he is credited as teaching Lynott how to play bass. He gives him a Fender Jazz bass guitar that he bought from the artist Rory Balla for £36. Is this it?
This is a Fender bass. Is that a P bass or is it... did you say it was a P bass?
Jazz bass.
A jazz bass. Well, they both look the same to me. So
Could be.
No,
Could be in this room.
it's not that one. It might be this one.
Okay. Well, all through this story, it comes across like so many different Irish artists. Bala is another, some of his work. We've used it in some of our episode covers before, but prolific Irish artist. He tried his hand at music for a while, tried to be a touring musician, decided it wasn't for him, sold his guitar to Shields, and then it ends up being Lynott's first bass guitar.
Okay.
It's very incestuous. Dublin is a village, as you are fond of saying, and especially back in the artist community in the 1960s. But apparently, and this is another thing that he used to do that a lot of other artists couldn't get away with. In the retelling of the story, it had the line, most of the taxi drivers had no idea who Phil was. I guess at the time, taxi drivers would kind of, like at home, like, you know, at a home in Dundalk or Carlow, they probably kind of know, they'd know you, they'd know the family.
Yeah, I feel like he had a fairly obvious...
So they didn't know who he was, but he used to let on that he was a Nigerian student in Trinity.
I was going to say, all you students look the same to us.
But he put on an accent. So he would get picked up by taxi drivers, put on a fake Nigerian accent. And he tells the story on one occasion when he got back to Crumlin, the taxi driver told him that the fare would be 10 shillings. Phil dropped the accent and told him, no, it'd be 7 shillings and 6 pence, the same as it always was every other time. The taxi driver was like, no, he wasn't happy about being caught out. So he started insisting it was 10. They went back and forth. Phil, paid him. The taxi driver gave him his change back very slowly, kind of thinking Phil wouldn't take it off him. Phil did take it off him.
Of course.
When he got out of the taxi, supposedly the taxi driver hopped out the other side and shouted, I'm glad they killed Martin Luther King, which had supposedly happened that day.
Oh.
Now, I don't know. That's a story.
That's a story.
Yeah. So
did Phil tell this story to anyone?
It came. It's
or did
like
the taxi driver tell it?
It's an unused anecdote in a book that was published, and the story is from one of his other bandmates. Now, I don't know. Martin Luther King, as you know, was killed on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which was a tragic coincidence on his own day.
Who would have saw coming?
Yeah. But 4th of April, 1968. So I was going to say the timelines add up. The timelines for he was alive in Dublin went at the time when Martin.
Just the chance of a taxi driver at the time being that politically aware of American.
That would have been huge news.
Would the taxi driver have been reading?
He'd be listening, thinking, we got him.
Did they have radios in the car then?
Yeah, maybe. They'll be hanging around at the rank being like, thank God, now Teddy Kennedy can really get to work. Or Bobby Kennedy. I don't know who else was shot that year.
I suppose 69, yeah, okay, yeah, it's not like the 20s, it's not that far ago.
But who knows if that happened? Let's just say yes. So, Lynott and Downey, they put together a new band called Orphanage, which is again, like continuing the theme of orphans. But it's got the guitarist Joe Staunton and bassist Pat Quigley. Though the initial concept behind the band was like a flexible ensemble where they would just switch in and out. There'd be no core members, which is again
Phil's dream.
Yeah, it's a big theme in all of his bands. Every time he gets into a band, I think he's always got an idea for solo projects, even though most of the bands tend to be basically solo projects.
But if they're solo projects, he can play bass now. He's learning.
He's getting there.
He's getting there on the bass.
He can write the music though, he just can't play it, I guess.
Okay, impossible, but fair enough.
Yeah. But not for Phil,
because he can't do that from like humming the tune, because he's got a vocal problem. His vocal problem's been, I can't sing in key.
Well, he got that fixed, I guess. Maybe that might have been a little bit of I don't know. Shields is one of these guys he's sort of a musician's musician as well in Ireland, and he was on TV here. He's like a big deal, but never really made it into mainstream success. I suppose these days, like a lot of musicians would know who he is, but he'd be a Rory Gallagher type maybe, but maybe not as famous outside the country. Yes. But he might have shot Phil in the back in order to see this take over Skid Row. I don't know how real the tonsil thing was, is what I'm saying. But maybe it was, and he got sorted. I don't know. So in this new iteration of Orphanage, they played a mix of original material alongside covers of like Bob Dylan, Jeff Beck, bands like this. So still learning the bass at this stage. Lynott was restricted to sometimes playing the rhythm guitar, sometimes just singing lead. But this is his first real iteration of doing original music. He's gone through a couple of bands at this stage. This is the first time where he is writing and performing his own stuff.
Gotcha.
Alongside Brian Downey as well. But it's his first opportunity to showcase original material. So in 1968, he also has a son and puts him up for adoption, which doesn't really factor into a lot of his... This doesn't really come to light until 2003, so much, much later on. But also, weird to name your band Orphanage.
And then...
That year.
Yeah.
Either before or after.
Either or you'd change the name. He's like, no. We'll just change the lineup.
So he's only 19 at the time, but there's like a constant theme in his early life of like he doesn't have a dad. He narrowly avoided ending up in an orphanage himself, kind of like his brothers and sisters would have been in orphanages. He has had to give up a child himself to an orphanage.
His ma owns a hotel in Manchester.
Yeah, which is not a great place to raise a child.
So that's admittedly.
He doesn't really make... He spends a lot of time trying to get in contact with his dad. Doesn't do a lot going the other direction as far as I can see. Now, there are probably laws around that sort of thing where you can't reach out to the kid afterwards. And I don't know what the relationship was with the mother of the kid, but we'll put a pin on that for later on, maybe.
Fair.
Anyway, so in 1969,
great year,
two Erics from Belfast, Eric Rixton and Eric Bell, were looking to start a new band, and they began recruiting from the Dublin scene. So Rixton had been one of the founding members of Them, better known nowadays as Van Morrison's band. They had a massive hit, Gloria, that song. He named the band, he'd been one of the founding members, but he'd been underage when they got set up, so his parents signed the contract for him, and which saw him getting kicked out of the band before they officially recorded. So ironically, screwed over by a bad record deal himself before that went on to plague Van Morrison for most of his life. But he gets kicked out of that band. He jumps through a couple of different bands, show bands included, between Ireland and Germany before teaming up with Eric Bell. Eric...
Well, so they were the places they played. The band wasn't called Between Ireland and Germany.
No.
I would say, if we get them together, we'll finally take the English.
We can do this. I've got a surefire plan for France this time. But Eric Bell had been a one-time member of Them as well after Eric Rixton had left, before also getting into the show band scene. But by 1969, he was sick of the show band style. He wanted something a little different. So the two of them were basically going around trying to set up a new band based on Dublin players, and they come across Downey and Phil Lynott. So with Rixton as guitarist, Bell on keys, Downey on drums, and Phil Lynott on bass, they form Thin Lizzy. So this is it. Not by any stretches the main lineup of the band or the last lineup of the band, but it's the first one. So Bell provides the name this time. He calls the band after Tin Lizzy, Tin Lizzy, a robot character from the Dandy comics, which is controversial, I guess, because as we can see from this room we're in, Phil was a Beano man.
A Beano man, yeah.
So to take something from the Dandy, pretty sacrilegious at this stage. The etymology, I guess, so the Tin Lizzy was a character in the Dandy, which itself was named after Ford's Model T car. So apparently Lynott, much later on, discovered this and also heard the phrase that's attributed to Henry Ford: "You can have any color you like as long as it's black." And Phil liked that.
Phil liked that one.
Yeah, he thought that was good. It was appropriate for the name. Presumably he was less of a fan of Ford's other work, The International Jew, The World's Foremost Problem. Also, he's a Beano man. So... Did you ever read that, Ford's pamphlet from the 1930s? No?
No.
Oh, it's a real page turner. I loved it's better nowadays. People are too much of a coward to admit that they're racist. You know, you haven't got enough Peter Casey standing out on the streets just saying they're racist. Back then, you just wrote a pamphlet called The International Jew, The World's Foremost Problem, and you printed it and you gave it to your workers.
Didn't the lad in Weatherspoons do that with his pamphlet?
Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, Mr. Weatherspoons. So Phil straight back into a new band lineup now after Skid Row. He's starting up with Thin Lizzy. But back to Skid Row, I guess, for a second. He was still good friends with Shields, Bruce Shields. They'd be friends for life, really. Shields remembers fondly with his wife Margaret the time that basically after they got married in 1969, they didn't have money for a honeymoon, really. So they ended up going over to Philomena's Hotel in Manchester for a cheap holiday, which was very romantic until the rest of the band also showed up and Shields spent most of his honeymoon downstairs jamming with the band. So he says, I don't think the missus was very happy. Ended up playing with a band for the week and Phil would take Margaret out to dance. So he kicked Phil out of his band, and then a couple of years later he was like, oh, you need to go on a honeymoon. How about you head over to my mom's hotel? You can just play with this session music band and I'll take your wife dancing. Don't worry about that. Yeah. So he had his revenge. So in early 1970, Lynott brought the new group of Thin Lizzy into Trend Records, anxious to try out the new 8-track recording system that was in there. It was the only one in the country at the time. This is the
8 tracks, 4 more than you'd ever need.
So there's some early recordings from that setup. This is like the first iteration of the band. This is where we get into the first band changes, I guess. Although he appears in the band's first single that's produced from those sessions, The Farmer, Eric Rickson left the band in July of 1970. So, again, conflicting stories. People say it was financial issues. The band wasn't making money. Also read that the band didn't need him or like him. I don't know. Anyway, he's gone. But for the release of their first album, the band is listed as Thin Lizzy, ThinLizzie, as they were in a lot of their early posters, including a poster from that period from September 4th, 1970, in Richmond Park, your old home, and the current home of St. Patrick's Atletica.
Yeah.
It was supposedly, it hosted what was referred to as the first ever outdoor rock festival in Ireland in September of 1970. So it was headlined by Mungo Jerry, and it featured a very early first performance of Thin Lizzy. Not the first performance, but it's a couple of months after their setup. But pretty much nobody saw it because no one showed up at the festival. They expected a couple of thousand people to be there, but because it's 1970s Ireland, there was a lot of articles in the newspaper about how this was going to be the degradation of the souls of the children of Era. The Catholic Church had a lot to say about it. The Gardaí had a lot to say about it. With the end result being that about 800 people showed up, and there was more cops than punters there.
So like a regular Pats match.
Exactly. Mostly undercover shades. One punter apparently said, "I've been to better wakes," which not necessarily a criticism in this country. But in 1971, the trio signed with Decca and produced 2 albums. So the first, Thin Lizzy, the eponymous album, released in 1971. In there you get references to Clontarf Castle from his time in Clontarf, the friendly ranger of Clontarf Castle, and Clifton Grange Hotel in reference to his mother's debaucherous hotel over in Manchester. Yes. So there's a big Jimi Hendrix influence on this one. I'm going to leave out all the analysis of the music because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I did find it funny listening through the albums. I guess nowadays you're much more used to listen to bands that kind of start off with like a classic rock album and slowly
they went
get
like
more...
they were like prog rock and moved further as they became better songwriters and felt real actually understood music theory.
But it was just
it
was the music that existed at the time as well. At the start, they're very like ethereal, hippie music of the 60s, and then just after 4 or 5 albums, just straight bangers, which is a funny progression. But during the band's early years, and despite being the lead singer, bassist, and chief songwriter, Lynott was still fairly reserved and introverted on stage, which is again contradicted the early reports that he got all of his swagger from Kama Sutra.
Yeah, that's a great story though.
Every band, like, is it?
No, but just specifically that, like he read the Karma Sutra, and all of a sudden,
no, there's no band called.
He got all of his moves from the Karma Sutra.
Yeah. So supposedly he would stand to one side while the spotlight concentrated mostly on Eric Bell, who was initially regarded as the group's leader, even though he was the guitarist. While they were recording the band's second album, Shades of a Blue Orphanage, which is again the orphan theme, apparently Lynott very nearly left Thin Lizzy. He was getting courted by Deep Purple's Richie Blackmore and Ian Pace. So there's a lot of rumors about this. Supposedly, basically, they were in talks about forming a new band. So him leaving Thin Lizzy at this point and set up a new band supposedly called Babyface. 15th of January 1972, New Spotlight magazine had a line saying, "If Blackmore Lynott's single Wanted Alive takes off, will the Lizzy leader quit the group to join the new Blackmore band?" So I don't know if there is actually a recording of that single. This is where it gets a bit sketchy, I suppose. They did meet up a few times. They may have recorded stuff together. There's various reports. I think it does exist, but it's not good, basically.
Okay.
I read a lot of different...
But they did call them like an entertainment magazine to let them know that we've recorded something.
So there's a couple of shots across the bay, maybe. I think at the time they denied it existed, and then as years went on, they were like, "No, we have it. It's just not good." So you probably won't hear it. Although by the time I'm recording this, maybe it is out. I don't know. But from Brian Downey, the drummer. He said that one day Richie turned up to the recording studio where they were playing, and he asked to jam. I was asked to play drums with Phil and Richie jamming. Me and Eric looked at each other like, well, that's the end of the band then. It only lasted a week though, and Phil came back as if nothing had happened. Bit ballsy to ask your drummer to fucking play for you, but the other guy from Deep Purple is coming in to court you.
Yeah.
So that's from his point of view. They reckon Phil disappeared for a while, played some stuff with him. It didn't work out.
A week.
He came back. A week. A couple of days he went over to see what it sounded
Loads
like.
of lads are in multiple bands.
Yeah.
He's been in how many so far?
Exactly. So supposedly Downey took this as a... Phil wanted to be the front man, the leader of the band. Although it sounds like it was Phil holding himself back, that he wasn't confident enough to be a front man. So I don't know. But later Richie Blackmore would confirm that they did record some demos from that time under the name Babyface, but they're not good.
Okay.
So we may never hear them. But towards the end of that year, 1972, Lizzy gets their first major break in the UK by being asked to support Slade. So this is a big deal.
Of
Slade,
Christmas #1 hit.
yeah, absolutely. So they're at the top of their commercial success. Slade are at that time.
Yeah.
So being asked to tour around with them is a big deal. What's another Slade song?
There's that.
I know.
Yeah.
Which one is it again?
Gone.
Yeah.
I just know that they have
I know.
Christmas-
Yeah, that's all. I always, they're like the Christmas band, but they had other stuff at the time. Apparently, so Noddy Holder from Slade, he would wear hats with mirrors on them, and this is where Lynott gets the idea to attach mirrors to his bass to shine light around when he was on stage. On the opening night of the tour, though, an altercation broke out between Lynott and Slade's manager Chase Chandler, who gave out to Lynott for his lack of stage presence and sort of bad interactions with the crowd. So things get pretty tense. He threatens to kick Lizzy off the tour unless they get their shit together pretty quickly. So this is supposedly where he develops his onstage rapport. So this is probably the fourth, he's a very famous musician and he's dead. So a lot of people want to claim that they are the reason for his charisma on stage. It's probably just him. He's a charismatic man. I think he gets over his initial stage fright or whatever it was that was holding him back. He clearly wants to be a frontman based on the other stories and whatever. This is another person, I guess, that says, he was shit until I came out to him and then he was very good. But maybe it was this swagger.
Is everyone just constantly giving out to him though? No one ever thought about putting an arm around his shoulder and being like, I think you can do it, Phil.
Yeah, but where's that going to get anybody,
Maybe somewhere.
Wasn't that a study they did on pilots? Basically, if you give out to pilots after they've done a bad flight, their performance improves. But if you congratulate them after they've done a particularly good or above average flight, their performance decreases afterwards. Which feels like solid logic, but really all that's happening is they're just returning to the mean.
Yeah.
So if you can give out to him or you can congratulate him, he's just going to do whatever he's going to do afterwards. But
so then why do people insist on clapping on when planes land?
They have stopped doing that, I think.
Have they?
I've been on a couple of Ryanair flights to South Spain recently, aka Claptown, and no one's done it. Someone's tried to do it and then got embarrassed and stopped.
Do you think Michael McIntyre is a bit about?
That's probably what
happened. Yeah.
But 1973, Thin Lizzy first top 10 hit with their rock version of the traditional Irish song Whiskey in the Jar.
Yes. God, this is still. I'm trying to. This is it 76 when they really get going? Is that when Jailbreak comes out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This
It
is
takes
so
a while.
long.
Yeah. And they're not. They're the classic. They popped up out of nowhere, an overnight success. It only took them 12 years. They did several different band iterations and 4 albums, 4 studio albums before it really takes off.
Richie Blackmore wanted to make him famous.
Yeah, but this is their big. It's not even their big breakthrough because they go right back to not making any money right after this. But it's a early success, I suppose. And again, not early because it's the third album, but it's a success in 1973. The cover of Whiskey in the Jar. The cover art for the album is by Jim Fitzpatrick of Che Guevara image fame. So
Ah,
another famous Irish artist tied up in the story. But it tops the Irish charts and reaches number 6 in England, which
isn't that because that's
means
like
that people at home care about it.
he never made any money off that? It's like the world's most popular free to use image.
Che Guevara.
Yeah,
Yeah, he never copyrighted it because he rightfully so. I mean, when
we would have felt bad about. That's sort of something that's
when you're younger, I thought that was ironic that Che Guevara is so tied up with communism, and then his image is one of the most capitalized. Like it was on everything, but it wasn't a capitalist statement because he never made any money from it.
Yeah.
I think he did trademark it much later, like maybe in the last couple of years. Because at some point he was like, right, you're taking the piss now.
Right,
when I said it was free to use, I thought it meant like on album covers and on interesting art, you could spray it on walls. I'll put it on a fucking every
Penny's t-shirt.
pencil case and Penny's t-shirt from a sweatshop in Vietnam. So yeah, I don't know. But anyway, he creates the album art for Whiskey in the Jar. The band's pretty surprised by that. Apparently, they had intended it to be a B-side. They didn't think it was going to be a big song from that album. But it doesn't really change much. The band still hasn't had their big breakthrough.
I think that at any point then they were just like, right, we're just going to have to start covering Irish poems.
Maybe. Like Phil is...
Next up, Inniskeen Road, July.
Phil is big. Maybe like a lot of... I suppose when he's growing up, he would have had a lot of people questioning his Irishness. Even after he grew up, I've watched a lot of interviews where journalists are just like, so you're from England? And he'll just like cut across them repeatedly until they're like, well, it's all the same, isn't it? Great Britain, Ireland's like, no. Republic of Ireland. And when I'd say it was born out of people questioning that the whole time because he was black in Dublin.
Yeah.
But maybe as a product of that as well, he's big into Irish history, Irish nationalism, old stories, Celtic mysticism, Celtic folklore.
Artistes.
And artistes.
Fanulasta.
Exactly.
Clan.
Artistes like that. So he wouldn't have been opposed probably to doing a lot of old Irish songs. But the follow-up singles from the album don't really go anywhere. They fail to chart. Bell departs at this stage. Supposedly, he just drunkenly walks off stage during a gig in Belfast and never comes back. So, I don't know. But he's replaced by another famous Belfast musician. This is when Gary
Morrison.
He wishes. This is when Gary Moore joins the band.
Okay.
So, where I said they'd met before, Skid Row maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where you.
This is his first time in Thin Lizzy.
This is his first time in Thin Lizzy.
Yeah.
And not his last time in Thin Lizzy. Not his last time joining Thin Lizzy, I guess. But Gary joins. I think Downey briefly leaves and then returns. Things are shaky basically in late 73, early 1974. Doesn't seem like the band is going to last. During this period, they end up doing sort of cover band thing for Deep Purple. They join up with another band called Elmer Fudd under the name Funky Junction and release a series of basically a tribute album to Deep Purple, which, considering he was a couple of days away from joining up with the members of Deep Purple.
And is it an actual tribute album, or is it just in the style of?
So Funky Junction was filling it.
But it's not a cover. It's not a cover album, like.
So the album is called Tribute to Deep Purple, and 5 of the 9 tracks are Deep Purple songs, with 4 of the other ones being credited to Leo Muller, who's the German producer of the album. I don't really know. Basically, they're tied for money, and they end up doing essentially a Deep Purple tribute album.
Mm-hmm. It's not like one of those like ones that you don't have the credits for, so you can play in supermarkets.
Maybe, yeah. It's like technically not Deep Purple, but it's
like,
light pink.
They're like, now look, we can finally play Deep Purple in the supermarkets. Like, that's not why we weren't playing Deep Purple in the supermarkets.
Yeah. But so Eric Bell's out. So the two of the original members now out. Gary Moore joins them for a while, but he basically quits because of the heavy drinking. He doesn't think he can keep up with the lifestyle.
Right.
So he's in and then out. In 1974, the same year, Lynott releases his first book of poetry, Songs for While I'm Away, which will later become the title of his documentary.
Oh.
It's got 21 poems, which are all lyrics from Thin Lizzy songs, except for one called Holy Encounter.
From future Thin Lizzy songs or previous Thin Lizzy songs?
I think previous.
Then that's not a book of poetry. That's just you've collected all of the lyrics from your yet to be successful musical career.
Sure. There's only 1,000 copies
like
of the
when
book.
Jim Morrison released books of poetry, it wasn't just the Doors lyrics.
Yeah. Well, one of them was original. It's only 21 songs. Leave them alone. There's only 1,000 copies of the book printed, so one of them is probably in here somewhere.
I shouldn't be talking shit about him. We're in his room.
They're basically in his bedroom. There he is.
I'm going to release a book of poetry or long form essays, and it's just our episodes transcribed. Prolific, 400 in the space of a day.
So he's releasing his poetry. The band's struggling. Gary Moore's gone. For the tour of that summer of 74, they bring in Andy Gee and John Cann. They also appear briefly. But it's not until the recruitment of guitarists Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson what many would say the platonic ideal of rock and roll. Not many. I read that in one article. I thought it sounded pretty good. But this is the classic Lynott, the classic Thin Lizzy Lynott.
I got him.
You did. Which, this is 4 albums in, several years after the band has been around and through many different formations. This is the one that most people consider the classic.
Mm.
This is where they established their famous twin lead guitar sound.
Yeah, I was going to be like, so he's after... Is Downey still in it now, or he's gone?
Downey's still in.
Downey is
like the other.
So what he's done is gone and created a famous guitar band by getting 2 brand new guitarists.
2 already very established guitarists.
Yeah, who are phenomenal.
Yes. So Brian Robson.
It doesn't matter how much that fills out the band.
Yeah. But like Gary Moore was a very successful.
Oh, he's class. Yeah.
He just couldn't drink. He wasn't.
But just but that sound was specifically of like, what if you just had like 2 lead guitarists playing the exact same thing, just like harmonized? It's phenomenal. Yeah.
So they move away from the sort of ethereal hippie music and into just like, what if we just shred? Just bring out the guitars. They bring in Brian Robson from Glasgow and Scott Gorham, a guitarist from LA.
Goro
Gorham. According to Robinson, how they ended up in the band, when he specifically talks about Scott, he says, we didn't really want him in the band, but there were reasons for having him. He was American and he had long hair. It had nothing to do with guitar playing. But Phil, he was thinking about world domination and getting to America.
Okay.
So I don't know how true that is, but Robson, who'd only been in the band for a wet day, like he'd only just got in and was like, me and the boys didn't really want the yank, but it'd be good for business. And Phil, he saw these things, so I don't know. The 2 albums that followed, Nightlife in 1974 and Fighting in 1975, are where this twin guitar sound is being formed and evolving, but they perfected over their USA tour in like 1975. So in 75, after searching for his father, kind of on and off, and I think he was quite intently searching for him in his early 20s. Apparently he went to Rio. He thought that he was there, and he went looking for him.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
That's it's
a big trip for a young man.
But also just like, someone must have given him a tip off to be like, he's in Rio, go look here.
But it's also because there's a lot of confusion as to where his dad is from, and I'm guessing reading between the lines is because his mom forgot. Because she's the only point of contact, so the information must have come from her. There's a lot of confusion that he's from Brazil. Yeah, but I don't know. Anyway, he tried to track him down as a teen and his early 20s. At this stage, I think he kind of given up. But apparently now they're successful. Well, to be fair to his dad, I guess he knew where to find him. It was easier to find him now that he was a famous musician.
Mm-hmm.
So Caesar reaches out to him, and Lynott agrees to meet him in 1975 at the age of 26. According to Scott Gorham, they're due to meet for the first time in London, and Phil doesn't want to meet him by himself. So he asks Gorham to stay with him. He said, I've asked this guy down to the BBC studios, but I really want you in the room. So we were recording when his father walked in, looking super fly and dressed in a white 3-piece suit with white patent leather shoes and a white hat. Phil and I just looked at each other as if to almost say, what the fuck is that? I couldn't believe it, and the whole thing was really uncomfortable. I thought if I got out of the room, at least these 2 men could have a dialogue. So I started to get up, and Phil grabbed me and gave me a look, but I told him to sit and have a chat. I walked out, and literally 10 minutes later, this guy comes storming out the door, and that was the end of that. I think Phil pretty much told him to fuck off, and that he didn't need him now because he never had needed him before.
But he spent...
he'd spent his early days trying to track him down, and then I think his dad tracked him down when he became successful, and so he was kind of like, well, fuck you. Showed up here in your hat. So that's pretty much the end of him. But that same year, possibly after that, and that's why his dad got in contact with him. But
He goes looking for his illegitimate son.
Nope.
No, okay.
Dad never, no more mentions of that. Because, yeah, he gets very annoyed at his dad. He's like, well, you never fucking shut up for me. And doesn't put that in the
Anyway,
after his own son. That same year, he's busy with.
You really seen with your inflection and your tone, you're like, that's what spurs him on to go. Nope.
Never
Oh.
never meets him. Dead by the time.
What else?
Long dead. By the
What
time
else
he
happened
gets
in 1973?
out. Nothing. But 1976.
Whoa.
Jailbreak.
Jailbreak.
The thing that makes him an international success. The big album, which is, what are we now? Album like 6 or 7. Which is a good moral lesson for perseverance, I guess. Well into their careers, they become massive celebrities. Or musical superstars, international superstars. So...
Well, they're already touring America before this.
Yeah.
That's like incredible.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Insane. Now, they're touring America. I mean, I think they're doing support tours for a lot of people, but they are, yeah, like by any measure, they're a successful band.
Yeah.
But now they become...
Touring America, playing their own music
Yeah.
and occasional covers.
Having an occasional hit, which was a cover, I guess. But
They don't forget that Deep Purple cover of.
Yeah, that's true. But they're not financially successful. So they're turning around, but they're not making any money of it. But now they've got breakout album, Jailbreak, and their biggest hit from that album, The Boys Are Back in Town. The song reached the top 10 in the UK and was number 1 in Ireland. But more importantly for them, was also a hit in the US and Canada.
Because they had an American.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So The Boys Are Back in Town, arguably the most famous song.
And Jailbreak. There's loads on that album.
Yeah, but this one, I didn't find any references. I don't think this is true, but it is a footnote in someone else's. Basically, out of Philomena's Showbiz Hotel over in the Clifton Grange Hotel or whatever.
Yeah.
As he gets more famous, it becomes a sort of more of a celebrity hangout. Sort of associated with him, but it becomes kind of known for... Basically, George Best likes to hang out there a lot. Bands like the Sex Pistols, so they have a big gig in 76. It's referred to as the gig that changed the world, which I think you might have referenced earlier on in the Rory Gallagher episode, actually. But because of their reputation, they were finding it hard to find a place to stay afterwards. So they end up at Philomena Lynott's hotel. She says, they couldn't be nicer lads.
Yeah.
Very sound. Lovely boys. So it's getting this kind of reputation for... punk musicians, rock and roll celebrities, also just old-fashioned criminals. So a group known as
rock and roll stars and celebrities.
Yeah, pretty much. But a group known as the Quality Street Gang, who were a bunch of gangsters from Manchester. There's 2 reports as to where the name came from. It was one story that they just walked into a bar one day and the ad was on the TV at that point and someone just shouted, "Oh, here they are, the Quality Street Gang," and the name stuck. The other idea was that they're all just fat.
They've been named after the worst chocolates.
Whatever it was, supposedly they claim, or someone claims, that Boys Are Back in Town is written about them.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true. The other Thin Lizzy song, Johnny Fox meets Jimmy the Weed. Apparently Jimmy the Weed was a nickname for one of the gang members. Don't know. Anyway, the Quality Street Gang. They've written themselves into Thin Lizzy history. But while they were touring around America, they were kind of on the impression that tickets weren't really selling. They weren't seeing much of a payoff from the Jailbreak album. But they're surprised to learn that The Boys Are Back in Town had become a big hit back home while they were touring. They hadn't really picked it out to be one of the breakout songs from the album. But apparently, Scott Gorham attributes the success anyway to the song to 2 DJs in Kentucky
I thought you were going to say the Maze Prison Break.
The Maze Prison Break. That was how Jailbreak got successful. There's 2 DJs in Louisville, Kentucky, who just played it incessantly until all the other stations around them picked it up. Had that song not kickstarted the sales of the album, then the band would have been over. So probably not too much hyperbole there to say that they needed this to take off. So while they're on tour, the Jailbreak album blows up. They become very successful, which is great, apart from that tour needs to be cut short because Phil contracted hepatitis. But now they're big. The next album, Johnny the Fox, released in 76, also very successful commercially and in the charts, but tour support for that also gets interrupted when
Gets hepatitis A.
Nope. Robbo cuts his hand allegedly in a barroom fight. I'm going to say definitely in a barroom fight, and can't play the guitar. So he was told he would never play again, which, you know, wasn't true. But basically, Gary Moore has to come in and replace him for the rest of that tour. Again, Gary, he wasn't fond of the pint a couple of years ago. Now,
but surely with the success, the lads have calmed down.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now it's time to.
Now they've got more money and more success. It's really time to dial in the music, focus the art. So in early 1977, the band's tour in the US of A with Queen. This is the Queen Lizzy tour. Not the Queen, but
it was
yeah. But Brian, this is the other Rory,
hell of a show.
This is the other Rory Gallagher connection. Rory taught Brian how to play. Some would say Brian May stole his style, and now here are Thin Lizzy touring around the USA with them.
Elite, but yeah.
This is literally the same.
I don't think, no. I wouldn't say that Brian May sounds that similar to like Rory Gallagher.
Brian said that he got his sound. He's like, when you watch the interviews with him, he's just like,
but he's at this stage just anyone who put a camera in front of him is like, yeah, I'll be in that documentary. documentary.
And I tell you, the first time that I saw Phil Lynott, I thought he was the greatest musician that ever lived. I truly owe all of my success to Phil Lynott.
Remember that trend a few years ago of that like Kanye West put Paul McCartney in, that was a 4 or 5 second song? Was it Rihanna and Kanye and Paul McCartney?
I don't know.
Because
people were like,
but there was like, you kind of put him, he's a bit old, so make sure he's in the shadows, he's backlit, it looks cool, and you can't tell that he's a 70-year-old man. Yeah. And a lot of people were like, it's just a fair play to Kanye, launching this man's career. But but Brian May, on a much smaller scale, did a song with either N-Dubs or Dappy from N-Dubs.
Yeah.
And they had to come entirely backlight him.
Yeah.
So you couldn't see his face at all, because he was a 70-something-year-old musician.
Lemmy.
Sorry, Brian May. You're not cool enough
to be in N-Dubs with Dappy. I think history will shine kindly on this moment. I don't think I will be talking about Queen in the near future. But Lemmy is another guy Lemmy from Motorhead, also talks very fondly about Phil Lynott. I think it's him. I saw an interview where he was like, Phil, when he died, that was the only one I ever cared about. Which is after all hard. Yeah, I think like him on some talk show, he was like, that of all the ones that we lost, that was the one that's the only one that really hit me. Did you ever see this? There's a print in Shin A here in Dublin of Lemmy with a quote. I don't know if he ever said this, but it's a quote that just says, Kanye West, never heard of her, on his head. Did you ever see that?
No. It's
in Shin A. Every time I see it, it's like that. That makes less and less sense as time goes on. Like, I get it's a whole like, oh, Kanye West, never heard of her. I don't know when Lemmy died, but even at the time, I'm sure that didn't make sense. He was like one of the biggest R&B artists of his day, and now he's like, I don't know, one of the few global superstars. Anyway, R.I.P.
He wasn't listening to that though.
Yeah, but then why? Why take time out of your day?
Do you think someone else accredited it to him?
Definitely. I don't even. I think it's just like
someone else had that thought, and they're like, "That's a good quote. No one will listen to me if I say it."
Yeah.
I need to find someone who will I get? The guy who gets women to suck on his mole.
Don't even put it in quotation marks. Just write it on a picture of his head. Let the viewer do the libel work for you. But Lemmy, never heard of her. Was that Scottish guy from Twitch? So at the end of the Johnny Fox tour, Phil, Brian, and Scott began working on the next album, Bad Reputation. This is the first of the 3 albums to be produced by Tony Visconti, of Producing Everything You've Ever Loved fame. Features some session work by Robbo, who I guess at this point has had his hand.
He's taught himself how to play left-handed.
He's flipped it around. So he also shows up as a guest appearance in the subsequent European tour, and then becomes a full member for the 1977 USA tour. So he's not gone long.
You'd want to be really fucked to not play ever again. Like with the amount of times
Doctors
you hear
like
of like,
to
oh, I've
exaggerate
crushed your entire forearm. We'll just put a giant metal rod in there.
Yeah.
Tony Iommi had his fingertips cut off in a workplace accident before he even was proper. I don't know if it was before he's famous or just playing guitar, but you're like when he was definitely working in a factory.
Yeah.
Django the musician, didn't he only have like 2 fingers?
Norm Macdonald's friend Schaefer, is it?
Yeah, Billy Ray Schaefer.
Billy Ray Schaefer. Yeah, he was missing like half a hand, wasn't he?
Definitely a finger or 2.
fingers, yeah. I feel like not that it didn't hold him back at all, but
He
it didn't hold him
bass.
back for long.
Phil Lynott had a whole career and he couldn't even play an instrument or sing a note for the
Bite your
couple of
tongue.
years. I'm just saying for the first few years from what you've said,
Yeah, I know,
he
you're
couldn't
right,
play an
yeah.
instrument and he had a vocal difficulty.
I feel like it could have also been a thing of like, because bands, I mean, not so much maybe in this era, but because they are...
Def Leppard's drummer only had 1 arm.
They have a recording studio in Ireland, on
Def
the island
Leppard.
of Ireland.
Huh.
I don't know. In the documentary later on, maybe I missed something, but they land in Dublin Airport, and then the next scene they're in Def Leppard's studio. So I don't know why they would go to the trouble of showing the airport if the studio's in a different country.
Or if the lads were landing back into their studio in Ireland.
I don't know. He said like, "Here I am," and to pick up, it's Scott from the Dublin airport. And
Oh
there's,
well,
him and
because he's flew from Belfast all the way down to Dublin.
all the way down to Dublin. And he's in a taxi smoking a cigarette like a fucking rock and roll star. And then they're at the studio, so I assume it's on the island or was at the time of the documentary. But I think there might have also been a thing that maybe not so much at this stage, but like because they are Irish and Robbo is Scottish. Basically, you can get banned from the States. Like the Kinks never made it as big as the Rolling Stones because they got banned from the States for getting in fights. So I think if you're, maybe they're out of that stage now, but it's only like the mid 70s. If you get, well, no, because you could get blacklisted basically. You could lose your work visa, so the band could get barred from playing, which means you don't get to do any more USA tours. But he released another book of poetry in 1977 titled Philip. All right.
So
So
what's in this?
just other poems. Shut up. So throughout the 70s, he'd taken a keen interest in punk rock. He became friends with various members of the Sex Pistols, the Damned. He'd become friends with Geldof and like the Boomtown Rats later on. At this stage, he starts toying around with different, again, from his various managers and stuff and his various bandmates, there's always kind of the idea that he would leave at any minute to form a different project. But anyway, he starts playing around with different band variations at this point in his career. He forms an ad hoc band known as the Greedies. Originally, it was the Greedy Bastards, but they changed it for commercial reasons, which is very funny for a punk band. It's what's more punk than dropping the term bastard from your title. Supposedly, it was because they were he was in trouble with the IRS for tax stuff.
Okay.
So the Greedy Bastards popped into formation. So during Lizzy's downtime in 1978, he played with the Greedy Bastards. It was a mix of him and two of the other members from the Sex Pistols, which I don't know why I didn't write down. Two of the other...
It wasn't Johnny Rotten or Sid Vicious.
No, it was Jones and Cook. They played like a mixture of Thin Lizzy songs and Pistol songs, but also released a Christmas album, or basically two Christmas songs, which I've never heard, even though there's fuck all Christmas songs. And one of them is from a Phil Lynott Sex Pistols mashup called The Greedies.
Whoa,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
It's a Christmas classic. I mean, it's fine. It's a Christmas song.
Have you heard it now?
Yeah, I've listened to it. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Is it as good as Slade's one?
yeah, it's as good as Slade's one. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But it's crazy that I'd never heard of. That was one of the few. There's a lot of different band mashups and like different artists coming in and out of this story. That was one of the few that was like, oh, I'd never heard that. That's
who's coming round the bend. It's Santa and his reindeer friend.
yes. He also performed alongside Jones and Cook on Johnny Thunder's debut album, So Alone, which was exciting for me, but maybe not for you. I don't know. Anyway, this period he also plays with Elvis Costello, records with Bob Geldof. He's having a good old time.
He's top of the world.
Top of the world. He's become accepted by mainstream musicians. He's now just having fun with it.
Mhm.
He's playing with all of his kind of peers and contemporaries at the time, basically. But drugs, alcohol, and personality conflicts see Robson depart. after the summer tour of 1978, which finished up in Ohio, and Gary Moore is once again brought in to fill in the spot, which is supposed to include Australia. So Brian Downey is sick of touring at this point, doesn't think he can make Australia, so he leaves. Mark Nusef steps in to play the drums. Again, so this makes it at this stage.
Gary Moore, I'm questioning his decisions to keep going back.
Well, he doesn't mind playing with them for a little bit, but he can't handle the full thing.
He can't do tours.
But he is coming in for tours.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he doesn't want, I don't know. He's got his own things going on, I guess. But this, I think this is the first time Brian Downey steps out, so this is possibly the first iteration of the band, so Phil Lynott is now the only continual member of the band, contiguous or whatever. So in 1979, oh boy, Gary Moore rejoins the band. Apparently this time was supposed to be permanently, and they're leaving a US tour, but then Gary leaves again mid-tour.
Okay, yeah. For the last time?
No, he'll be back in again, don't worry. He left more abruptly than Thin Lizzy than he had before, I guess. So they're kind of screwed. They're in the middle of a tour. Moore later says that he regrets this time. Maybe it was wrong the way I did it. Maybe I could have done it differently, I suppose. But I just had to leave. So when he returns back to his home, he finds that the locks in the apartment have been changed because Lizzy's management have been paying the rent. This comes into what is described as a war of words.
But now I can also see why he keeps joining the band. He doesn't own his own house.
No, I mean, he is his own. I mean, we'll talk about him some other day. He's also the Rock and Roll Museum Experience in Temple Bar. But I guess he isn't. He needs the money.
But I was lucky then eventually he sold his guitar for a couple of million.
Yeah, but so there's a war of words break out in the press at this point, with Moore calling Phil Lynott an unprofessional junkie and Lynott just calling Moore unprofessional. Now, the two of them do make up much later on, but this is the first kind of maybe indication in the press of his drug issue. But the Thin Lizzy are kind of fucked. They're in the middle of a tour. They need to get someone in quickly. So they bring in Midge, or this is before he's in Ultravox. So they bring in Midge. Midge, again, this is similar to what kept happening in the Gallagher story. And this is kind of what happens a lot from here on out in Thin Lizzy. He has to learn all the songs basically on the flight to the band. So this is you got to learn the whole oeuvre. You're going on tour right away. So he fills in for the rest of the.
But whatever about the songs, at least once he has those down, it's just easy, plain sailing, personality wise.
Yeah, exactly. So supposedly he kind of influences them with his new wave looks. Scott Gorham cuts his long hair. They bring in a keyboard player after this to try and move into the 80s. But Ur keeps with them through the tour of Japan in 1979. He says, Japan was an amazing experience. My first memory was the look of horror on Phil's face when we walked into the first hotel and all the girls were screaming, Midge, Midge. His previous band, the Rich Kids, had never been to Japan, but they were pretty big in pin-up magazines because they were all pretty boys. And so all the kids recognized me. I think Phil was a bit miffed by it. So that's pretty funny.
So he was just in like a glorified pop band, like a...
His,
like
whatever,
like
yeah, the Rich
Busted.
Boys, yeah. They were
like
they had been big in Japan, but they'd never gone. So all these fans turned out to see him, which annoyed Phil. Which, yeah, another thing we also talked about.
It's just like the Stripes.
Another thing we talked about in the Rory Gallagher episode was he said the whole trip was quite bizarre. The first thing, which I know all bands comment on, was the audience reaction. You get this explosion of applause. Then after about 3 seconds, it'd just cut straight off, and the audience would just sit and look at you, awaiting the next song.
Get crazy.
Yeah, I guess that's just how it was.
But they would have seen... I guess like every culture is going to be different, but...
They wanted to respect the music, I guess, then.
But they would have seen what like the live gigs that would have come from the tapings and all, like the DVD, not the DVDs, obviously, but like it wouldn't even be VHS. But surely on TV, they would have seen, like, what year was Woodstock? They would have seen like thousands of people going crazy at gigs, and like, this is what the US do, and you love the US music, but you're going to just sit there like it's an opera or something.
Yeah, they probably saw a lot of stuff on American TV. It doesn't mean they're going to start.
It's actually a very good point.
Yeah. What are we going to just shoot Godzilla? No. It's a force of nature. So, 1979, according to Gorham anyway, is the year that heroin swamps the band. We'd always dabbled, but not in the super class A stuff. It wasn't until we got to the Black Rose album and we were in Paris. In the hotel, Phil called me up and says, "Come on down to my room. I got something I want to show you." I had dabbled with heroin in California before I came, So England was saving me. I didn't know anyone who had it or was doing it, and I was really clean and felt great about life. I walked into Phil's room and he pulls out this package. He opens it up and I see the brown powder and he says, "You know what this is?" And I went, "Yeah." "Have you ever done it before?" "Yeah." "You want to do some now?" "Yeah." And that was the start of the whole thing. That was the worst mistake the band ever made.
Ooh.
So I've kind of watched a little. Other people have commented a lot more.
Gary Moore said, "Lads,
the only pint of brown I want is a strong ale." A lot of people have done more commentary on this and kind of like show different clips from this point on. And again, I'm not going to get into the music analogy or whatever, but like there's a strain on Phil's voice. They look pretty haggard heading into the 80s. This ages them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, other reports say, like Robbo Robertson disputes that version, saying that heroin came in 79. He says that in 76, like the hepatitis that stopped that tour was from a dirty needle.
Oh, okay. So they weren't just smoking it. Not to say that that's, but it was proper.
Yeah, and more another version of Gary Moore's departure in 78 was over disgust of the heroin use.
Yeah.
So, don't know. There's a couple of different versions, but you could
I was going to say because it'd be weird for people to be leaving a rock band over you're drinking too much.
Yeah. But certainly by heading into the 1980s, it was they were getting serious with it. But they're also enjoying considerable success heading into the 80s. Phil launched a solo career with his album Solo in Soho, which was a top 30 UK album, and gave him 2 hits, Dear Miss Lonely Hearts and King's Call. The latter was a tribute to Elvis Presley and featured Mark Knopfler on guitar.
Hey.
Yeah, so his second solo album didn't go as well, the Phil Lynott album, which I don't really know why. Also, is a funny thing in processions of his albums. He's usually on the album cover, but he just keeps getting closer and closer. So the Solo in Soho is like a picture of him looking cool with a jacket at a wall, and then the Phil Lynott album is just a massive zoom up of his face. But it didn't do commercially as well for some reason, but it has Old Town on it, which is one of his big songs, I would think, and Yellow Pearl, two of his big hits. So Yellow Pearl would become the theme tune to Top of the Pops. But I guess you can't pay rent with that. In February of 1980, he married Caroline Crowther, daughter of British comedian Leslie Crowther. Yep, looked him up for a while. I think he partially came to fame due to his minstrel shows on the BBC. He saw Phil putting on the boot polish and he thought, whoa.
He was like, "Top of the Pops, do I have a song for you?"
So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I couldn't find anything about their interactions, but his father-in-law would have done blackface on TV in the BBC.
You were saying she had daddy issues.
So they had 2 kids together. So Sarah, born in 1978, and Kathleen, who was born in July of 1980. But he wrote 2 songs, 2 eponymous songs for them, Sarah and Kathleen, which are 2 very nice songs. It was during this period, in the 1980s, he purchased properties on Howth Peninsula in North Dublin, one of the nicest neighbourhoods in the city, and got a house, a house called White Horses, I guess, in Sutton, which he gave to his mum as a 50th birthday present.
Yeah.
Which is very nice. Looking after the mother.
Look, buying a house for your mother.
Yeah, although he bought a house in the Howth Peninsula and I gave her one in Sutton, which I would think is a bit of a slap in the face, really. Close, but not exactly the same thing. Now, heading into I saw this written from a gig in May of 1980, which is supposed to be an insight into how Phil appreciated his fans. So, May 5th, 1980, the band was playing in Glasgow's legendary Apollo when Phil got annoyed about the bouncers were basically beating up, or as he perceived it, beating up some young guy at the front of the gig. So he stormed off, stopped the concert, locked himself in the dressing room, and demanded that the promoter, Adrian Hopkins, sort it out. They went to go find Adrian. Unfortunately, he'd gone and snuck away for Chinese food. So they had all of the staff running around looking for him. Then they started looking around the local pubs to try and find him. No one thought to look in the Chinese restaurant. So they couldn't find him. But eventually the crowd started chanting and cheering for Phil, and he relented and went back out on stage. Now that was supposed to be an example of how he cared for the fans, but I don't really know.
He got them to stop beating up that guy.
Maybe. I don't know how long he disappeared for. Also, this is at the time where there's a lot of...
Did he leave to go do heroin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories that I've seen around that are,
Every
unverified.
gig, 40 minutes in.
Yeah. Oh, he's being beaten up again. I'm not playing until... Get the manager.
He's a plant.
He'd see the manager just tip out for Chinese food and be like, well... He'd rub his belly and look at his watch. So... Heading into 1981, the band now consisted of Phil, Scott, Brian Downey, Snowy, and Darren Wharton on keyboards. In 1981, they released Chinatown, which is apparently we can really start to hear the effect of.
You hear the manager leave for food.
Chinatown. Yeah, that's when he'd start playing the songs. No. But this is where you can really hear the lyrics being strained by the effects of the old heroin. But also that year, they released the greatest hits compilation, The Adventures of Thin Lizzy, which went gold in the UK.
3 Deep Purple songs on it.
There is another new album, Renegade, which didn't really get... it wasn't really a commercial success with the fans or the critics. But even though the tour... in 81 with their turnaround with Renegade, it's more commercially successful. I think ticket sales are going better than the previous tour, but at this point, the drug use is really starting to affect the reliability of the band. So Phil is having regular asthma attacks, and I suppose the effects of the heroin are really coming through in their live performances. So at this point, after this tour, Snowy quits. But in 81, they also make rock and roll history by having U2 open for them at Slane Castle, Meeting of the Greats. They also...
that was their first single. I've learned that while doing the tour here at the Irish Rock and Roll
Oh, it's also
Museum experience.
Bono, the recorded version of that song, Bono thanks Phil Lynott.
Phil Lynott,
yeah. More rock and roll history, though, in 1982, where he plays alongside Rory Gallagher in a giant poster that'd be hard to miss outside of the rock and roll.
Definitely not one you would have missed on the way in before doing an episode podcast about Rory Gallagher, and then maybe your co-host and should ask a question on that podcast. Saying, sure, did they ever play together? He said, I don't know, actually. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm sure if they did, there's probably documentation somewhere,
especially an iconic photo of the two of them shredding beside each other. But anyway,
I thought they said Hendrix never played with Gallagher.
In 1982, this is where his second solo comes out, the Phil Lynott album. But with the lack of success from Renegade, latest solo album, and increasing drug use as was in the band, Thin Lizzy was essentially on the verge of bankruptcy. They were described as being too broke to pack it in, which I don't really understand, but I guess they want to leave with a bit of dignity, I suppose.
Is that the last album?
A bit of dignity. They're broke, but they don't have enough money to... They want to do a last album, last tour, farewell kind of a thing.
Just book a tour, and instead of being unreliable and not showing up, show up to the gigs.
Well, easier said than done. But to remedy this, John Sykes brought in on guitar at that point to replace Snowy, and they plan a 1983 Thunder and Lightning farewell tour off the back of the Thunder and Lightning album, apparently to just raise money to
retire.
I guess pay everyone out and retire, basically, yeah. So, as it turns out, the Thunder and Lightning album and tour go way better than any of the other previous ones. So, they feature what some consider to be the band's best working years. So, it's a bit of a resurgence. One lasts for a while, they all get it back together again. The band goes out in a blaze of glory. The tour lasts about a year and features a final gig in the Hammersmith Odeon with some special guest guitarists, including Scott and John. They get all the
and Gary Moore.
And Gary Moore one last time.
Who leaves mid-gig before coming back for the encore.
No, it does. He is there. Yeah. Brian, Robert Robinson, Gary Moore, and Eric Bell all come back to help play it. So the double live album, Life, includes highlights from the tour.
They've perfected the quad guitar sound. 4 soloing guitars.
They just keep adding guitar after guitar. But apparently they didn't really... I don't know what... They didn't release the album. They recorded a live album, but didn't release it until much later. After the momentum had gone. Don't know. Anyway, but that was the end of Thin Lizzy. So in 1983, they did this band.
Does Phil do any more solo stuff after that then?
So 1983, during breaks in the Thunder and Lightning tour, him, Brian Downey, John Seeks, they'd set up another band as the Three Musketeers with Mark Stanway, which doesn't really make sense. It's basically, because it's, who are they leaving out there? Brian Downey, John Sykes, Phil. I can't keep track of the fucking iterations of the band, but that's basically the band. So during the breaks in the tour of the band, but I guess it's going so well and they're just happy to be back that during downtime they form another band called the Three Musketeers. So there's three of them anyway from the band, and they bring in Mark Stanway. So they're working away with that, and they've got Deutsch Nigel on guitar. So they did mostly covers of Thin Lizzy songs and Phil's solo tracks. But he plays with them a little bit after Thin Lizzy finishes up.
That's
I don't know what.
That's better than swallowing your pride and be like, you know what, the band's going to keep going. Like, they wouldn't be the first like band in history to do a farewell tour and then get back together.
No. So they play a little bit with the Three Musketeers after Thin Lizzy dies down, but it's supposed to be it's a trial run for Phil's next band,
D'Artagnan.
Grand Slam, D'Artagnan, in 1984. So, well, Thin Lizzy's final gig after they finish up is at the Reading Festival on August 28th, 1983. Final gig with Phil as the frontman. Oh no, sorry. That's the last UK gig is Reading Festival in August of 1983. And then the final concert with Phil Lynott as the frontman is in Nuremberg on September the 4th of 1983. But in 1984, he forms a new band, Grand Slam, with Deutschnagel, Lawrence Archer, Robbie Brennan, who had come up in some of the other iterations of his other bands, and Mark Stanway. So the band toured the Marquee and other clubs, but suffered from being labelled as basically a poor version of Thin Lizzy, owing to the fact that they were a poor version of Thin Lizzy. They also hadn't sorted out the underlying issues of the heroin.
Yeah.
So the band falls apart in 84 along with his marriage. So he is living apart from his wife at that point. I don't think they get divorced, but they're living apart at that point.
Of course they
drug
don't.
use escalates.
Unless they were married in England.
So yeah, true. But heading into 1985, I don't want to lay a lot of blame or any blame
On the heroin.
But I am going to put it on Bob Geldof. It's Live Aid. The big multi-band, multi-continent spanning charity gig is set up by people that Lynott would have been very close with and former bandmates. So he would have played with Geldof in iterations of not Thin Lizzy, but he would have done backing vocals for some of Geldof's music, would have played with the Boomtown Rats. Midge Ure as well is instrumental in setting up Live Aid, who would have been a former member of Thin Lizzy, touring member of Thin Lizzy, and Lynott would have helped get Ultravox signed to his label. The Thin Lizzy and specifically Lynott aren't invited to play. So
probably because of
now Geldof later says because the Band Aid Trust could only accommodate commercially successful artists selling millions of albums, which neither Lynott nor Thin Lizzy had done. Which
they just had a successful.
Yeah, I feel like it's he's not reliable at that point.
Yeah,
but I suppose maybe he's not as commercially successful as other bands, but like he's more commercially successful than the Boomtown Rats, presumably.
Yeah. It sounds like the Boomtown Rat Bastards.
Yeah, there you go. But he doesn't take this well. This is certainly not helping his descent into heroin madness. He gets worse throughout the year of 85. So what? Live Aid is the summer of 1985, I guess. And eventually he collapses on Christmas Day of 1985. He's found by his mother, Philomena, in his home. And apparently she didn't know about his drug issues. But she contacted his wife, Caroline, who knew about the issues. She drove him to a clinic where he was diagnosed with sepsis. The facility was able to keep him alive for a couple more weeks, but eventually he died on the 4th of January 1986. So he's found Christmas Day. He's dead then a couple of days. At age 36 years old. So
36?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. So many albums put out, like toured around the world. Serious amount of
prolific.
That age.
That's mad. Yeah.
I
was making a lot of pot shots, a lot of jokes there, but like that's what was it 6 albums before Jailbreak?
Yeah. But also
amongst multiple other bands, books of poetry, solo albums, other iterations of bands,
Now, depending on who you believe, I suppose that is a long time, but either, somewhere between 7 and 10 years of heroin use. Dead. Now,
just like that.
now, officially his cause of death is listed as pneumonia and heart failure due to septicemia, which is sepsis. But
But usually isn't that like pneumonia is always the
pneumonia
one.
It's pneumonia that gets you,
Yeah.
but your system is weakened by the heroin use. So, yeah.
Rory did well to get to 46.
He did, but he wasn't. He was just drinking and taking pharmaceuticals. So Lynott's funeral is held at St. Elizabeth's Church in Richmond on the 9th of January, with most of Thin Lizzy's ex-members in attendance, followed by another service in Howth Parish Church on the 11th of January. He's buried in St. Fintan Cemetery in Sutton in Dublin. So the band regroups for a one-off performance in 1986, the year afterwards, with Bob Geldof taking lead vocals.
The rat bastard.
They released a hit called Too Little Too Late. That's not true. But
hold on. So you're telling me that Bob Geldof didn't allow Phil Lynott to play Live Aid?
Yeah.
And then Phil Lynott died that a couple of weeks, a few months after.
Let's be generous, couple of months
After, directly because of that.
That's
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to blame too much blame on Bob Geldof, but 100% because of that.
Put it at his,
And then as a way to pay him back for that, he takes over his band.
Yeah.
For a hit tour.
I don't know. They do a one-off performance. Yeah.
And then performs at Live Aid 2 as Thin Lizzy.
On the 4th of January 1994, a trust is set up in Lynott's name, founded by his family and friends, to provide scholarship for new musicians and to make donations to charities and organizations in his memory, which is still running today. In 1995, thin-lizzyfan.com was set up, making it... I have absolutely zero figures for this, but I imagine one of the earliest band pages put on the internet. 1995, still running today. That's where I stole a lot of this information from. Late 1998, a little group called Metallica releases another cover of Whiskey in the Jar.
Yes.
Which brings a little boost back to Thin Lizzy at that point. In 2003, Philip's son Dara Lamb shocks the world when he comes forward to announce that he's Phil's until then unknown son. So he's interviewed by Jerry Ryan. He looks... Did I show you a picture of him?
No.
He looks a spitting image of him.
Uh-huh.
So he knew he was an orphan growing up, I guess, and the whole time people would just kind of slag him or say that he looks like Phil Lynott. He traces back his lineage through the orphanage, but after he is a kid, I think.
It just says Rio.
No, it says his dad was listed as Phil and his occupation as bassist. And he was like, whoa.
Whoa.
All right. So Philomena came forward. I assume she talked to him in between, but she talks to the papers in 2010, I think, and acknowledges that he is Phil's son.
Okay.
In 2005, a life-size bronze statue of Lynott was unveiled in Dublin off Grafton Street on Harry Street.
Mm-hmm.
The statue.
The statue?
Yeah. 2012, the members of Thin Lizzy decided to record new material, but they chose to do so under the name Black Star Riders to retrospect for. So it's especially because it's such a fluid band. I don't know why they bothered even. So they just changed the name.
Yeah.
So it's just the members.
How many members?
I don't know. And which members?
Yeah.
Don't know. Anyway. In 2012, Mitt Romney chose The Boys Are Back in Town for his election campaign song. Philomena, Scott Graham, and Phil Lynott's widow all objected to the use and got it taken down. Philomena told Hot Press magazine, "As far as I'm concerned, Mitt Romney's opposition to gay marriage and to civil union for gays makes him anti-gay, which is not something that Philip would have supported." So that's a good stance in 2012. Every January from 1987, from the year after his death until 2019, with a final iteration in 2023, Lynott's friend Smiley Bulger hosted a festival for him on the anniversary of his death entitled Vibe for Philo, where a number of musicians would play at the festival, including Thin Lizzy tribute bands and usually some iteration of the Thin Lizzy band. So couldn't really find out why the last one was last year. I guess he's just getting kind of older. Like, considering I've seen like every January, February, there's a thing for Bowie, who never lived there. I've never heard that there's been an annual festival for Thin Lizzy.
And often a Jeff Buckley night as well. There's usually people who do different musicians.
Who they both? Well, Jeff, he's as Irish as Pints of Guinness. He lived there. He played in Trinity.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's for his birthday now. Okay. If you can't pick that up on the mic, Maddie has informed us that the festival is now on his birthday, which, as we all remember from earlier, is the 20th of August. I stalled there for a little bit, but I got it. Yeah, but there's always that festival for Bowie. I'd never heard of this, but this seemed to be like a big deal and like pretty well attended. There's a website anyway still called Vibe for Philo, and you can go back through all the different iterations of the festival.
That sounds familiar though.
Maybe.
Like I've never gone.
Yeah, from watching the documentaries, there's a whole endless litany of musicians who talk extremely fondly of Phil Lynott and credit him with, being their inspiration, being a musical hero of theirs. He has inspired whole genres of music. Again, I'm not going to go into the musical analysis, but people credit him with being the first or biggest or best Irish rock and roll band, which they're great.
They're fantastic, and obviously, like, there's the knock-on effect of like U2 supporting them. Their first single, were they called U2 then, or were they under a different name?
I think they were at that stage, but I think they are. But yeah, and we're in the Phil Lynott section of the Rock and Roll Museum of the
Irish Rock and Roll Museum Experience,
which is full of amazing. I was going to say artifacts. Is that the right word? Memorabilia and personal items and effects.
Yeah, Maddie said I could take that tour jacket.
Yeah, she did, yeah. And it's on record now, so she can't go back in it.
Yeah.
But this is all...
And if she tried to, she's not on mic, so it wouldn't make a difference.
This is all donated by Philomena, so it's been great to be able to record it here while...
I have had my back to these guitars for ages, and I've just been kind of... like, I didn't realise we were going to have rocky chairs in here.
Of course.
And I don't mean, I didn't want to have like flames on them and guitars. I mean, like they swing backwards right beside these prized possessions.
They swing low. But yeah, any final thoughts on Phil?
No, I've always been a fan of his tunes. If he would have done, like he definitely would have done. He did loads for like race relations in Ireland.
Yeah, certainly no musicians, like certainly or like celebrities like that.
Yeah.
Football stars would come afterwards, but he was he helped us stop being racist for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, no, because even when you said that, like that, there was 1 in 10 like college kids.
Now, I think that number is also reflected in how few people were going to university here. Yeah.
But just in terms of having someone who would have had an Irish accent and like you've been in like ties of Irish culture and things like that it would have been. Yeah, it's hard to think of people from that. I don't know them anyway. From like from the 70s.
Like to be honest, there's so many interviews.
The 60s even. It's
there's so many interviews where like we talked a little bit earlier on. Like there's a whole list of interviews where he's correcting people on that he's Irish, not English. But especially the early ones, the reporters can't even seem to wrap their heads around that concept of a black Irishman. There's one in particular I remember where the interviewer was like, "So you're half black, half Irish." And he kind of like rolls his eyes like he's not half either. He's like, what does that mean? And there's just a lot of like, explain that. What does that mean? Explain yourself. You're part like. So when you see a sign that says "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish," what is that? A double negative? What happens there? But yeah, very influential musician. Would have been interesting to see what he would have done if he had survived.
Yeah.
Heroin, not great.
Bad.
10 years you'd say max, completely ruined an extremely successful career and killed a very prominent Irish musician too soon. But I think that's it.
Really good.
I kept saying this to you, we'll finish on this, that we should go out and do a list of Irish songs that people will join in on a night out. I think that Dirty Old Town by, Ewan MacColl, but more famously The Pogues, and Dancing in the Moonlight.
Oh, yeah.
I think on a night out, if you went at 1 a.m, if you're walking down Grafton Street or outside Workman's, if you're walking down the Quays, Harcourt Street, if you just started belting out Dancing in the Moonlight, I think people will join in. And that's a testament to his musical skills.
I bet I'd say the same for Boyzone and Westlife. They probably have a couple of tunes.
Yeah, but it's still, that's a rare honor, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I know that that's true because I've done it a couple of times. But yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. And thanks for the Irish Rock and Roll History Museum experience.
The Irish Rock and Roll Museum.
I keep saying history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Irish Rock and Roll Museum experience.
For having
us down. Thank you very much.
It's an easy
been an
name
honor
to remember.
It is. It
great
rolls off the tongue.
It does. It rock and rolls off the tongue. And you should go down and check out the nice, lovely museum they have here. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Good luck.
Shafter.